Welcome to Biology of Marine Mammals. I'm Dr. Leslie Williams, and this lecture covers the musculoskeletal system of mammals. To start, we're actually going to look at comparative anatomy and physiology and what that means. And from there, we'll take a look at the mammalian musculoskeletal system as kind of an overview of what the muscles and skeletal system are doing. And finally, we'll actually turn our attention to the skeletal system as we look at the axial and appendicular divisions. Comparative anatomy and physiology is kind of a big phrase, but it's a really important one. So to start, let's break it down and figure out what are we actually trying to achieve. Anatomy is the study of form, and physiology is the study of function. Because form actually determines function, they are often studied together as anatomy and physiology. Adding the comparative in front of it means that you are comparing the anatomical and physiological design of an organism across species. And this is really an interesting study area, and one that's going to be very useful to this class when we look at marine mammals. So much of the theme of the next module, as we do comparative anatomy and physiology, will be first learning about how it works in a human, and then actually taking a look at what's going on in a marine mammal that's different than a human, and how those differences help the marine mammal survive in its environment. So let's actually start with an example of comparative anatomy of the forelimb structure. Now, mammals come in what's called a four-limb design. We have two forelimbs and then two hind limbs, so our arms and our legs for humans. And so these pictures right here show the basic skeletal elements of the forelimb. In a human, that would be, of course, the arm. So what I want you to do is take a really good look at these pictures here, and you'll notice that in this picture here, we actually have a human arm, and we have an upper arm limb, and that, of course, is going to be the humerus, and it's found right here for you. And then we actually have two that are below it, and they're colored yellow and pink and peach, and those are going to be the radius and the ulna respectively. And then you have a set of bones that seems to make up the area of your hand. You have a set back here that's coated in yellow, and then you have the ones that make up parts of the fingers, and those are coated in brown. And if you take a good look at this comparative anatomy picture, you'll see the color scheme is repeated. In other words, in the canine, which is probably a dog or a wolf of some sort, in the center, we still have the same white bone. We have the pink and the peach bone. We have the yellow bones and then the brown bones, but you'll notice that they're not identical to the ones found in the human. That's an example of comparative anatomy. Now, what you want to ask yourself is, why are the bones different? So let's take a look at just those two to start, and we'll see if we can figure out some difference in function based on the form. And if you take a look at the canine, you'll actually see that the humerus, or the area in white, is a lot thicker. And if you take a look at this peach bone, which is called the ulna, we notice that it goes back quite a bit more. And of course, the area that represents the hands in humans, or the paws in canine, are very differently shaped. And of course, all of that reflects function. So we can probably guess just from the shape that this animal puts a lot more weight on its upper limbs or its forelimbs. And of course, if you've ever seen a dog or a wolf, you know that's true. They put their weight equally on all four limbs, where humans do not. We do not walk around on our arms, we walk around on our legs. So you can see a thicker humerus here, or this white bone, to reflect that. The ulna going back a little bit farther also shows that there's more weight being transferred there. And of course, the brown bones are shaped much more for paws rather than dexterous fingers as in humans. All right, and then finally, let's go over to the marine mammals, since this is a class about marine mammals, and we'll see some drastic differences. Notice the bones are still all there. We have a white bone, we have a pink bone, and a peach bone, we have yellow bones, and of course we have the brown bone, but they are very differently proportioned and shaped. If you notice, the bones that make up most of our arm, what you might consider to be from the shoulder all the way down to the wrist, are very, very squat. and short in the cetacean, either a whale or a dolphin. And if you also notice, there doesn't seem to be any place for an elbow, and that indicates that there's probably no movement right in that area. And then of course you probably have already noticed that the brown bones are much longer than what you would normally find. And of course, we can surmise that that supports the shape of the flipper. So here's a great example of how anatomy basically determines the function or the physiology. Now that we've done an overview of comparative anatomy and physiology, let's get into the musculoskeletal system. If you take a good look at the word musculoskeletal, you'll see muscles and skeleton put in there together. And it's sometimes considered a combined system because both the skeletal system and the muscles that attach to the skeletal system together are responsible for motion or locomotion. So your skeletal system and your muscles together allow an organism to move. The skeletal system provides the framework for the body. So it's basically the outline of what your body shape is going to look like. The skeletal system is just the collection of bones. And when you have your collection of bones, the muscles are actually going to be attached to the bones at specific locations, and where they're attached allows you to generate a particular motion. So the skeletal system is the framework, and then when you actually flex muscles, it allows you to actually move that skeletal system and generate a directed type of motion. So let's actually take a look at the elbow and see if we can figure out how motion might be moved or generated at the elbow based on what the bones look like, and then also what's going on with the muscles. All right, whenever you have two bones that meet, we call that an articulation. And so that's the fancy word for it, but you probably know it as a joint. So if you think about your arm, try to move your arm in various places. So go ahead and do that right now. Try to move your arm, and you'll see, okay, I can move the shoulder. I can actually move the shoulder a lot. I can move it at the elbow. I can move it at the wrist. And of course, I can move my fingers. So every place that you have motion because you have an articulation there or a joint. So for example, if I were to show you my forearm right here and tried to move where my finger is, try to bend my forearm, I can't do that because the two bones are not meeting in a way that allows motion. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look actually at the elbow joint. And if you try to move your elbow, you'll notice that the elbow really only moves in one way, kind of like a door hinge does. And so it moves, flexes and extends, but you don't rotate it the same way that you can rotate your shoulder in a 360-degree motion. And that is because of the shape of the bones. So I actually have over here a humerus, which is going to be the upper bone, and then we have the bone that actually makes up the elbow. And what we can see is that when we attach it, like so, it fits in such a way that allows this hinge motion, very similar to the way a door moves. But we notice that because of the way it's shaped in there, we really can't do too much else at this motion. At this joint. No, we can't do a 360-degree rotation like we can at the shoulder, and that is reflective of the bone's shapes. So now that we've taken a look at that, let's actually move and take a look at the muscles that are responsible for those motions. All right, the two muscles that we're going to look at today are ones you've probably heard of before. Biceps and triceps are commonly known muscles, and of course they're worked out quite a bit in the gym. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at those two muscles together to see how do they move the joint at the elbow. So in order to understand how the biceps and the triceps work, we first have to look at where are they attached, because the point of attachment is actually going to determine the type of motion that you get. And the biceps and the triceps are called antagonistic muscles because in reality, they actually do opposite motions. So let's go over here to my friend from the anatomy lab. We have a helper today. This is the skeletal model taken from our anatomy lab. It's actually a male skeletal model. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a good look at where the biceps are going to be attached to. And in fact, you can actually find these attachments on your own body, so I encourage you to follow along. This bone right up here is called the clavicle, but more commonly known as the collarbone. And then right below it, you have a projection from the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, right behind it, and it comes forward. And that's going to be the point of attachment for the biceps brachii, or just the biceps. So what we'd want to do is imagine that we're going to pull a string from here all the way down the arm to an area here in the forearm. And so if you attach an imaginary string all the way down here, that basically represents the 2 points of attachment for that biceps. So you can follow it along on your own body by actually finding your collarbone. And so if you find your collarbone and follow the S shape all the way out to the end, and then go just a little bit below that, you'll find that point where the biceps attaches to. And then if you follow that all the way down to the arm, it attaches about right here in your forearm. So if we drew an imaginary string from there all the way down and we yanked that string, you would see that the elbow flexes, like so. So yanking the string is a lot like contracting the muscles. So contraction of the biceps generates flexion, or flexing, at the elbow joint. And of course, when you see weightlifters do curls, you see their biceps flex as a result of that. Now the opposite side, we have the triceps, and the triceps actually run along the back side of the arm. So here you can see the triceps are actually attached to the back of the shoulder, and then they run down to the back side of the arm. And so if you imagined a string running down the back side of your arm like so, and you yanked on it, you would notice that it would straighten out your arm. So if you yank, it straightens out your arm. So there, that demonstrates that the triceps are actually responsible for extending your arm, and the biceps are responsible for flexing your arm at the elbow joint. And that right there highlights the importance of muscle attachment and exactly where it's located. If you change the point of the muscle attachment, you're going to change the motion at the joint. All right, with that, let's take a closer look now at the skeletal system and how it's divided. So the next 7 lectures are actually going to be all about the skeletal system and comparing it across humans and marine mammals. So to start today, we're going to get you warmed up to the idea by first looking at how the skeletal system can be divided. And the skeletal system, because there's 206 bones in an adult, it makes it a lot easier to learn if you first look at how it's divided. And so we're going to start with the 2 major divisions, the axial and the appendicular divisions. So the axial skeleton forms the axis, or the central region of the body. If you stand upright and you think about where your axis is, you would think, okay, it's probably the center of my body, and that of course makes the axial skeleton. In this picture here, the axial skeleton is actually shown in green. And then the appendicular skeleton, to append means to hang off of, hangs from the axial skeleton, so it's going to be everything that kind of hangs off that axial skeleton. So let's take a look at both in just a little bit more detail. The axial skeleton itself, and we're going to go back over here to our friend, our helper model, is comprised of the skull, the vertebral column, which runs down the base of the body, and then the thoracic cage, the set of ribs and the sternum that basically encloses the heart and the lungs. So that right there represents the axial skeleton. So again, skull, vertebral column, and thoracic cage are going to represent the axial skeleton. And then we have the appendicular skeleton, and the appendicular skeleton is everything else, or the what appends or hangs off of the axis. So the appendicular skeleton itself can be broken down into limbs and girdles. As I said earlier, all mammals have 4 limbs. So we have 2 arms, or 2 upper limbs, and of course then we have 2 legs, or lower limbs, and then each mammal has a girdle that supports it. So the pectoral girdle is going to support the upper limbs, and then the pelvic girdle supports the lower limbs. And from there we'll move on and take a look at more skeletal systems in the upcoming lecture. Thank you very much.